It's Wednesday, January 30th, and I'm your host, Paula Hersey. On Barnstable Today, Representative Tim Whalen joins us for a State House update, and Cape housing advocacy training dates have been announced for the spring session. First up, municipal and community news and notes. The Cape Cod Commission will hold a series of meetings next week to gather public input on the future of the region's transportation system. Topics at the public listening sessions can vary from the Cape Cod Canal bridges to the sidewalks to increased bus routes. Each listening session will include a presentation and time for questions and comments. The Mid-Cape session is scheduled for 2 p.m. February 7th at the Hyannis Transportation Center in Hyannis. An online survey will be available beginning February 5th. To learn more about upcoming meetings and to participate in the online survey, visit capecodcommission.org. Representative Tim Whalen is back on Beacon Hill and joins us in studio for updates on this session's bill filings. Representative Whalen is back in business on Beacon Hill with me today in the studio. Welcome back, Tim.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the kindness bringing me in here. A great opportunity to talk to your audience at home and keep them updated, give them a little bit more info on what's going on in their state government. Our local citizens here in the Cape and across the Commonwealth, they send an awful lot of taxes to Boston, an awful lot of their money to Boston. They need to know exactly, you need to know exactly what your government is doing with your money, and we'll do whatever we can to make sure you get every bit of info so you know.
Yeah, there's so much going on. This is the time where bills are being filed at a rapid pace.
Yep.
Emails are coming in, faster than anything that you can actually keep up with these days. So we'll start off with, keeping the streets safe from drunk drivers. So there's some bills that obviously Governor Baker has signed on to, and you're also doing some work there.
So what I did, Paula, and I appreciate you bringing this up, what I did was I filed a bill. It's been filed in past sessions, and the last session was filed by my good friend, Representative Luke Hafka from Stoughton, who's awesome. And this bill, it would allow ignition interlock devices in the vehicles of people who are convicted of a first-time OUI alcohol offense. My years in the state police, one of the things that I learned was when someone has a 90 or 180-day license suspension for their first offense OUI, life goes on. People have to go to the market. They have to bring mom and dad to medical appointments. They got to bring Junior to school. They have to get to work. Very often, these people will be driving a vehicle anyways. I think that the percentage of the Mothers Against Drunk Driving studies show that 80% or more of people who are under license suspension for first offense OUI will, in fact, drive a vehicle. What this bill does is it gives the offender an opportunity to get their license back, almost like a Cinderella license as we know it, except it would involve the installation of an interlock device in their vehicle. So that way, since we know they're going to be driving, we can ensure their sobriety behind the wheel. And this bill has been very, very strongly supported locally by my good friends, the Cottfilla family from Falmouth. Sergeant John Cottfilla, who serves in the state police, I've worked alongside for years, and they suffered a personal tragedy a couple of years ago when their son, John Robert Cottfilla, was killed. He was a sheriff's deputy down in Tampa, Florida, and he was killed by a drunk driver who was, I believe, 4 times over the legal limit, who drove head-on into his cruiser. And the Cottfillas have been very, very strong supporters of this, and the hope is that we can get this across the finish line. One of the positive things that I think shows that it might happen is the governor just filed a comprehensive package to deal with highway safety, and this was one of the components that he inserted into the bill. And the governor's awesome. He does a great job. And to see that he would make this a priority as well, it just kind of warms the heart. And that was a very nice phone call I was able to have with the Cottfilla family to say, hey, Charlie's behind this, so it improves the likelihood that we'll get it done.
Fantastic. And then also some increases in sentencing and fines and things like that around domestic violence and violence against, neighbors and people like that. So tell us a little bit about those things.
Thank you again, Paul.
Right.
This one's near and dear to my heart, having, again, with my law enforcement background, having responded to multiple domestic violence calls. It's important that we as legislators stay invested and involved in our community, and this is an example of that. These two bills that I filed derived from conversations I had with personal friends of mine who serve as prosecutors in District Attorney O'Keefe's office. One of the problems that was brought up was that when someone is arrested and charged with violation of a restraining order, whether it be their first offense, third offense, or 10th offense, there are no incremental penalties. So people are coming in and they're just, yep, go ahead, put me away for another 2.5 years. It's a misdemeanor. If you are on your 10th offense of violating a restraining order and putting your partner in fear, there should be incremental penalties. So what this does is this establishes incremental penalties, so anything second or subsequent becomes a 5-year felony. And I believe this is going to answer an important call from our prosecutors, as well as another bill. It's kind of a partner bill to it, but whereas the first one was dealing with the restraining order, this deals with the actual domestic batterer, the person who commits battery upon their partner, their loved one, their domestic partner, or what have you. And this, right now we have first offense and second offense penalties, and that's as high as it goes. This one would establish a third offense. So third or subsequent offense would have a maximum penalty, and again, it's up to judicial discretion, would have a maximum penalty of up to 10 years in a state prison. If you're going to be a domestic batterer, you need to go away for a little while and figure out life, and we need to keep people safe.
Right, exactly. And then some other ones, almost specific to Barnstable. There was some training here back in 2011 that you were involved in. Active shooter. Now, the high school is going through ALICE training right now, but there's other things on the horizon here for active shooter with coordination of all agencies, which seems to think that you would do that, but that doesn't always happen with so many divergent agencies, correct?
No, you're exactly correct. I served for a period of time in the state police on our incident management team, and as you mentioned, in 2011, we conducted it was a tabletop exercise at Mass Military Academy. MMA has a great emergency management program. And what they do is annually they will conduct a tabletop exercise, a large tabletop exercise, and bring all the stakeholders together and work through a scenario. And the scenario that we worked through in this case involved a shooting at Barnstable High School. And at the table we had Barnstable Police, Barnstable Fire, Fire, Hyannis Fire, Coast Guard, FBI, State Police, Sheriff's Department, Cape Cod Hospital. We had everybody together, and the value that comes from this is you work through the kinks in a scenario situation because God in heaven forbid it ever happens, you want to know where the problems are up front. One of the problems that we typically have, and having done a lot of these exercises, is the interoperability of departments. We get there, and the fire chief thinks they're in charge, the police chief thinks they're in charge, the mayor or the town administrator shows up, oh no, I'm in charge. What this does is this bill that I filed, it would have Massachusetts become the first state to adopt these newly devised, what they're called NFPA 3000 guidelines for active shooter and hostile event response. And it assigns roles, and it assigns roles under what we call unified command. So the police chief is in charge of police services, the fire chief is in charge of fire and medical services, the mayor or the town administrator, they're in charge of political response, communications, and things along those lines. They generally end up becoming the overall commander because you always have to have someone from government that ultimately leads the show. This was specifically mentioned to me as a priority by the professional firefighters of Massachusetts, and I went and I back-checked with the Massachusetts Chiefs of Police Association. And what we're doing is we're looking to make sure that Massachusetts adopts these concepts, these principles, so heaven forbid one of these horrors were to visit us here in the Commonwealth, we would already have a playbook that we're well practiced in, and we'd be able to respond under those guidelines as opposed to having to learn in the middle of a very chaotic, hostile, and violent situation.
Right, that's a fantastic bill to coalesce all of these people together. The town of Barnstable have done tabletop exercises for other types of scenarios like hurricanes and things like that. They're very, very valuable. And then having that, everything coalesced together is perfect. Speaking
from an emergency management standpoint, Paula, one of the things that happens is municipalities, state government, governmental organizations, even non-governmental organizations, very often will come up with a plan. Then they take the plan and they put it on a shelf and it collects dust. There's a value to having that plan, but there's a greater value to pulling that plan down off the shelf and maybe running everybody through it so that you're familiar with it, because when times are difficult, that's not the time to be going through. So is this on page 3 or on page 16, right?
Right.
And who are you? What department are you from? You don't want
Right.
that. You want everybody to be successful at interoperability.
Excellent. And then the last one here, this specifically was a bill by Representative Will Crocker, but you're playing a mentor role here. The bill is Nero's bill, and something that I hadn't realized, a dog lover from way back, is that police service animals are not, canines are not treated at the scene. So give us a little bit of, one, the mentorship, and two, what is this bill?
Sure. I got to tell you, Will did a great job with this bill. He really took it, he ran with it, he made this one of his #1 priorities. And again, this falls into what I was mentioning earlier, Paula, which is that we have to stay invested in our communities, we have to know people, we have to listen, we have to keep open the channels of communication, as Will does here. Lieutenant Jason Davern from ComFire had approached Will and I back, God, it was maybe during the middle of the summer, and was talking to us about the issue, what happened with the transportation of Nero on April 12th, when that awful tragedy visited us here on Cape Cod. And once we got past the end of session, we got into early August, Will and I and, we had people from ComFire, Barnstable Police, we had people, we had a couple of veterinarians, we had John Lacoste, who used to be my chiropractor, great guy from the ComFire district. We all sat down, we had a meeting, and we discussed what our needs were going to be going forward so we could ensure that police canines could be transported in an ambulance if they're grievously wounded at a response. Because, again, coming from a police background my whole career, police canines, they're your partner. We view them almost as human, right? So Will really took the ball and ran with this because it originated out of his district. Sean Gannon, God rest his soul, was a friend of mine. He lives in, he lived in my district, and he worked in my district. Will and I share Yarmouth, so he also worked in Will's district. But the tragedy happened in Will's district, and it was ComFire that approached us on this. So Will, seeing this, that this was primarily his responsibility, did a great job picking up the ball, running with it, working with those stakeholders, coming together, coming up with some language. He filed it, and right now, as you see, I was watching the Fox 25 News last night, and they were talking about Will's bill, the Nero bill, which was fantastic. It's these public relations outreach efforts that will help add co-sponsors to the bill, which ultimately, the more co-sponsors you have, the more likely it is that you'll get it passed. And this is something that's been identified to us as a priority by all of our public safety agencies here on the Cape. This has to get done, and not just here on the Cape, but on the other side of the bridge as well. This is something that we have to fix, and I just can't give Will enough credit. And I also want to thank all of my other colleagues, particularly from the Cape and Islands delegation, who signed on as co-sponsors as well.
Excellent. Thanks so much for coming.
Thank you, Paul. It's always my pleasure.
As well.
Take care.
Take care. The lack of affordable housing on Cape Cod is a community problem. It needs a community solution. Cape Housing Advocacy Training gives people throughout Cape Cod the tools to support affordable housing that is needed in their communities so that the region's workforce and others can afford to live here. David Quinn, Assistant Director of Housing Development for the Housing Assistance Corporation, explains. Are you looking for more affordable housing on Cape Cod? Would you like to be able to stand up at town meeting and tell them your story about needing affordable housing? With me today, David Quinn, Assistant Development Director of Housing.
Assistant Director of Housing Development. You were close.
Yeah. I was close. long title there. There's some new training coming out. It's a little bit like the 2 years that you've done previously,
Correct.
But now you're going to take the show on the road.
Yeah, so we have some really great trainings coming up for residents of Cape Cod. Anyone who's interested in housing as an issue and learning more about how they can be involved in advocating for more housing on Cape Cod. So this is really open to anyone. We have 5 trainings that are coming up. We're doing this in partnership with the Community Development Partnership out in Eastham. So HAC, Housing Assistance Corporation, we're hosting 3 of them in Mid-Cape. We have Saturday, March 2nd, that's in Yarmouth, in Mashpee on Monday, March 4th, and in Barnstable on Thursday, March 14th. And these are just 3-hour sessions, and they're going to be really an opportunity for people to learn about what's new in housing, what are some things that towns are thinking about as a way to address the housing shortage on Cape Cod, and then how you can get involved. And we're really hoping that these are some interactive sessions. We're going to do some mock public hearings, give people a chance to kind of practice their pitch, and kind of learn about ways that they can kind of tweak what they're doing to be more effective and really start advocating for themselves and for housing on Cape Cod. Or really any issue. I mean,
any issue. Once you learn these techniques, you can use it for any issue that is facing you and your community.
Yeah.
And I'm going to just bring it back just a little bit. The Cape is about 4,500 units short right now for housing. So, you know, there's really what we would call a housing crisis.
Absolutely, yeah.
Where can people kind of learn about this crisis and kind of how it came about? You did a white paper recently?
We did, yeah. So a couple of months ago, we released a paper. It's called Housing on Cape Cod, The High Cost of Doing Nothing. And it was really a summary of the issue of housing on the Cape, you know, how we got here, you know, what are some solutions that we can put into place and what the towns can do to solve it. You can check that out at capehousing.org.
Okay.
So that's a great, it's a pretty easy read. There's lots of numbers and fun facts. And again, the whole goal of the paper and these trainings is to make it really accessible to people so that it's you know, easy to follow, easy to learn how you can get involved and be a part of the solution. So that's really our goal.
Right. And you've been doing these sessions for about 2 years, and I had spoken at a couple of them.
Yep.
The inaugural ones, and then last year as well. And a part of what I really liked about this is taking an everyday citizen who may have had affordable housing in their past at some point in time, or lives in affordable housing now, and have them tell their story.
Right.
What's the value of that when people are hearing that story?
Well, it's huge. And it's not only about people who are living in sort of, you know, what would be considered, you know, affordable housing. It's, you know, really anyone on the Cape who's ever had a struggle finding a rental or trouble purchasing a home. And I think it's really important to get out in front of your elected officials and your volunteer board members who are making these decisions and let them hear your story, you know, that you're part of the community and that you're trying to advocate for solutions. Because I think all too often that these board members and, you know, selectmen and people making the decisions, they only hear from people when there's a project happening that they don't like. So people always come out and will oppose things. So we're trying to say, you know, organize, learn about the issues, and go to your elected officials with some solutions, and really encourage them to work on the solutions, and let your elected officials know that you have their back and that you want to see some of these things move forward. So this is sort of the first part of that, is just getting people in to learn about the issue, to make sure that they feel like they have the information and are equipped, well equipped to actually go talk to people about this stuff. Because I think a lot of people, they know there's a housing problem, they know they've personally struggled with it. You know, pretty much everyone on the Cape has some housing story, either themselves or a friend or a family member who's had trouble with housing. So it's more about figuring out how to kind of get that message to the elected officials and start making some changes.
Right.
Yeah.
And we've noticed through several of the towns across the Cape recently is accessory dwelling. So this is a really easy one where, you know, if you know that you've struggled and all you need is a small little apartment, you can go to these town meetings or to these boards and advocate for accessory dwellings.
Absolutely. Yeah, this is one that's sort of, we think is a first step, a simple solution. You know, it's not going to solve the entire problem of housing on the Cape, but there are a lot of people who have properties that would be great to add another, you know, an in-law apartment, a room that could be converted into like a studio apartment or something like that. And unfortunately, under most town zoning laws, you just can't do it. It's not allowed. So we're trying to make it easier for people to do that with their own properties, and that'll increase the housing supply overall, and for everyone. So, you know, whether it's affordable housing or housing that's you know, market rate, a little more expensive. We're kind of taking the approach that any housing is good housing.
Exactly.
So we're just trying to encourage towns to consider ways that they could easily add more housing without it impacting the community character too. Because so these, you know, so looking at the existing housing stock, and, you know, so this is not building the, you know, brand new big developments necessarily. It can be done on sort of the individual house-to-house level. And there's a bunch of towns this year that are considering these bylaws, or at least we'll have petitions to town meeting to consider these bylaws. So we're hopeful that people can come and get informed about this, and maybe they can go speak at their town meeting or speak at a selectmen's meeting.
Right,
Yeah.
and you know, we talk about speaking in public. Not everybody's comfortable
Right.
doing that, but there's other ways to engage town officials and folks that are making these decisions. Give some folks, you know, some of those other ways to engage.
Well, there's always the traditional approaches of writing letters and calling your elected officials. I think you'd be surprised how far that goes. I think a lot of people assume that, you know, I'm just one person, so what's my letter, what's my email going to make a difference? But it actually does. If you're an elected official and you're hearing from your residents, from your constituents over and over and over again about the same issue, you're going to take notice. So yeah, we know not everyone is going to feel comfortable getting up in public meeting and making a big presentation, and that's fine. So this training is really about what are the ways that you can get involved that work for you. We're also going to have some public speaking component of it, so some tips and practice for people who maybe don't feel comfortable, and how they can maybe improve that and get more comfortable doing that, so they can practice their pitch, which would be fun for people. So
Right.
it's all about making it accessible for people and not making it so scary, because I think if you haven't been involved in any local government, you might not know how it works or what to expect. So we're kind of trying to like demystify that whole experience and make it more accessissible for people.
Right, the whole protocol of
Yeah.
standing up at that podium.
Yeah, how
making
does it
sure
work?
that
If you've never been before, how does it work? Do I wait to get called on? You know,
Right.
even as simple as letting people know that you might be sitting there waiting for 2 hours, depending on how long the agenda is. So so kind of what to be prepared for when you go to these meetings. And
Right.
but it's all part of the process. It's all part of our democratic process. So we're
Right.
just trying to get people involved.
So what has HAC learned in the last 2 years of putting these trainings on? Are you seeing more involvement from those folks that have come through your original trainings?
Yeah, absolutely. We're starting to see a lot of energy around the issue of housing on the Cape. I think there's pretty much universal agreement that it's a problem among residents and elected officials, and so now it's a matter of, okay, so what solutions are going to work and how are we going to get those done? So we're definitely seeing a lot more involvement. I mean, our goal with this is to have a group of people in every town that are really tuned into the housing issue, and so they can go out and advocate for housing in their town, and also work across town borders as well and kind of advocate for these issues. So it's we're seeing this as a growing issue that people want to get more involved in. People don't want to sit on the sidelines anymore. They want to see something happen. So that's definitely what I've seen.
Right. And we've seen some comments over the past months of, people saying, well, I guess they call it the NIMBY, not in my backyard. But what I thought was really one of those phrases that stuck out in the training for me that I went through the first year is YIMBY,
Yeah.
yes in my backyard. How does that kind of work?
Yeah, I mean, it's taking that reverse approach. It's saying,
Right.
it's that whole idea of, if you're on an elected board, I mean, you're constantly getting people coming up to the podium and saying, I don't want this project to happen. It's going to reduce my property values. It's going to be unsightly. Who's going to be there? So we want people to take the opposite approach. We want people to get up there and tell their elected officials, yes, we do want affordable housing. We do want this in our neighborhoods. These are our peers, our family, our friends, and this is what we need. And so it's really just taking that opposite approach to it to combat that NIMBYism.
Right,
Yeah,
that
NIMBYism.
So, community development partner in HAC, you've got some February ones on the Lower Cape,
Yep.
but again, the dates for Yarmouth is March 2nd, 1 to 4, March 4th at Mashpee Town Hall,
Yep.
5:30 to 8:30, and right here in our own town hall, March 14th, 5:30 to 8:30. What I really, really liked about these locations is that they're at the town halls.
That was on purpose, yes.
It's on purpose. Why is that?
We want to have people get a feel for what it would be like to be at a public meeting. So
Right.
we're hoping that we're planning on doing like a mock public hearing where we'll have sort of a case study of a housing issue. We'll have people get up and sort of state their case. We'll have people who are opposed to the issue, board members, and so we're going to try to create the environment of what it would be like to be in a public hearing. So so people can hear, in real time, what are some arguments that you're going to hear against housing, and how do you respond to those? And so it's again, it's trying to just create that real atmosphere and make it more fun. We don't want it to be all a lecture. So we want people to come and kind of share their experience and have it be an interactive program. So
Right.
Yeah.
It's fantastic.
One thing I want to make sure I mention is
Yep.
that to sign up, you can go to capehousinginstitute.org. I forgot to mention that at the beginning.
CapeHousingInstitute.org.
You can sign up online.
And one last thought before we kind of like wrap this up is, who's going to go to this? Who really should go to this?
I think anyone who is interested, who has had trouble finding housing and wants to be involved in efforts to fix the problem on the Cape. So you don't have to have any experience doing any kind of advocacy work or have any knowledge of housing. If you do, that's great. It's really open to anyone, but we just want to get more people involved who are interested in this issue and want to be a part of the solution. So it's really as simple as that. And then, come to the training, you can learn about it, and then, it's up to you kind of where you want to take it from there. Like I said, we're hoping to have a group of people in every town that would be willing to continue to stay involved and be a part of this, going forward, advocating for these issues in town. But first step is just kind of coming, hearing. That's the only commitment we're asking for.
Right.
We'll go from there. So
It's one evening, and you can then advocate for your own neighborhoods and your own town.
exactly. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you, David.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Here's a look at things to do, places to go, and people to meet. The Red Sox World Series trophy will be making an appearance on Cape Cod next week, and you can take a selfie with it. The event will be held at Cape Cod Beer from 6:30 to 9 p.m. on February 6th. The 2018 trophy will be in Hyannis to help raise money for the Hyannis Athletic Association, the nonprofit organization behind the Hyannis Harbor Hawks of the Cape Cod Baseball League. All the proceeds from the event will go towards the group's field improvement campaign. The association has already received $700,000 from the town of Barnstable to make upgrades at the Judy Walden Scarfell Field at McKeon Park, the home of the Harbor Hawks. Admission is $10 for adults and $5 for children 6 to 10, with no charge for kids 5 and younger. Comments, suggestions, accolades, connect with us on Facebook and Instagram, email us, or send us an old-fashioned note by carrier pigeon. Channel 18 works. For you, I'm Paula Hersey, and thank you for watching Barnstable Today.